Prince Kalen lay on the soft golden bed of his chamber, his body weak and trembling. His scales, which usually shone like polished metal, had dulled, and his normally bright golden eyes looked tired and watery. The young dragon prince coughed quietly, each breath sounding strained. The palace was full of noise and activity, but no one seemed to notice him. The court advisors spoke only of politics, ceremonies, and taxes. The guards walked past his door without concern. Even the healers, who should have been attentive, were busy attending minor duties elsewhere. The prince tried to lift his head, but the effort made him dizzy. He closed his eyes, wishing someone would notice that he was sick, that he needed help. He had lived his short life in luxury and care, yet in this moment he felt very alone. His small claws twitched weakly as he tried to reach for the bell beside his bed. He wanted to call for assistance, but his voice was barely more than a whisper. In the quiet of the corridor outside, a human named Eli was sweeping the floors. He was small and unassuming, dressed in simple cleaning clothes, with a mop slung over his shoulder and a small toolkit strapped to his belt. Humans were common in the palace, often seen carrying supplies, mopping floors, or repairing broken machines. They were never considered important by dragons, especially not by those in the royal family. But Eli had a keen eye, a warm heart, and a sense of duty that went beyond his assigned tasks. As he moved past the prince's chamber, he heard the faintest sound of labored breathing. He paused, listening carefully. The sound was different from the usual coughs of palace residents. It was weak and strained. His curiosity and concern grew. Eli set down his mop quietly and approached the door. He could see the glow of golden scales through the thin walls, and a small cough reached his ears. He knocked gently. "Your Highness," he said softly. "Are you all right? Do you need help?" Inside the chamber, Prince Kalen opened his tired eyes. They widened slightly when he saw the human standing at the door. He tried to nod but felt too weak to speak. Eli understood immediately. The boy was very sick. The palace, for all its grandeur and authority, had failed to notice the urgency of the situation. Eli stepped inside carefully. "You're not alone," he said quietly. "I will help you." He examined the prince with careful eyes, noting the shallow breathing and pale scales. "This is serious," he whispered to himself. He looked around the chamber for any sign of help, medical supplies, a healer, but found none nearby. The palace was strangely empty, even though the prince was supposed to be important. The prince tried to speak, but his voice was barely audible. Eli leaned closer, listening. He realized that waiting for the healers might be too late. The young prince needed immediate attention, and the humans had to act quickly. Eli's mind raced. He had no magic, no authority, and no formal training in dragon medicine, but he had courage, determination, and quick thinking. He knew he had to do something. He checked the prince's pulse and found it weak but steady. Eli's eyes scanned the chamber. A hover carriage used for emergencies sat in the corner, ready to transport residents to the royal hospital. Eli's heart beat faster. He knew that if he could move the prince safely, there might be a chance to save him. He carefully lifted the small, frail body into his arms. The prince felt surprisingly light, but Eli held him securely, making sure not to jostle him. "It's going to be okay," he said softly. "I'll get you help." The young prince managed a faint smile, too weak to speak but thankful for the human's presence. Eli stepped toward the door, pausing as he passed the guards. "Excuse me," he said politely. "The prince needs urgent care. Please allow me to take him to the hospital." The guards looked skeptical. "Only the healers may transport the prince," one said, frowning. "You're just a cleaner. Step aside." Eli shook his head. "He cannot wait," he replied firmly. "He is very sick and no one else is acting." His voice was calm but filled with determination. He knew that hesitation could cost the prince his life. The young dragon prince felt warmth in his chest. No one else had acted, but this small human was willing to risk everything to help him. For the first time in hours, maybe even days, he felt a spark of hope. His breathing eased slightly as he clung weakly to Eli, trusting him completely. Eli moved carefully, keeping the prince steady in his arms. Every step felt critical. He had to navigate the long corridors, the marble floors, and the guards, all while protecting the fragile boy. Yet he did not falter. His mind focused entirely on the task at hand, saving the prince no matter the difficulty. As they approached the palace exit, the city beyond glimmered in the sunlight. The floating towers of Draconis shone with golden hues, and hover ships glided gracefully through the air. Passers-by stopped to stare in amazement at the human carrying the dragon prince. No one could believe what they were seeing. Eli's determination never wavered. He whispered softly to the prince, "We're going to the hospital. You'll be okay. Just hold on." The prince's eyes closed briefly, and he allowed himself to trust the human completely. In that moment, Eli realized something important. Even in a kingdom full of powerful dragons, a human could make a difference. Courage, quick thinking, and a willingness to act were more powerful than authority or status. And so, with steady arms and a determined heart, he carried the sick dragon prince toward the only hope of survival. Eli ran quickly through the palace corridors, carrying the young dragon prince carefully in his arms. Prince Kalen was pale and trembling, his golden scales dull under the bright sunlight that streamed through the palace windows. The prince's breathing was shallow, and his small claws twitched weakly as he clung to Eli. Every second counted, and Eli knew that waiting for permission could cost the boy his life. He ran past the grand halls where courtiers and nobles were busy with meetings and ceremonies. "Please? The prince is very sick. He needs help now," Eli shouted, his voice echoing off the golden walls. But the courtiers barely looked at him. One waved dismissively, saying, "Go back to your cleaning. The prince is fine. Stop disturbing us." Eli felt a flash of frustration, but he did not stop. He knew the prince needed him, and he would not let bureaucracy or pride get in the way. He adjusted his hold on the small body, making sure not to jostle the boy, and continued running. The palace guards tried to block his path. "Stop," one shouted. "You are not allowed to move the prince. Only the healers may transport him." Eli shook his head. "He cannot wait. He is very sick and no one else is acting." His voice was firm, but there was no anger, only urgency and determination. He stepped forward and the guards hesitated. They were surprised by the human's courage. They had never seen a human act so boldly, carrying the emperor's son without fear or hesitation. Prince Kalen felt a spark of hope. No one else had seemed to care, but this small human had taken action. Even though he was weak and frightened, the prince trusted Eli completely. He closed his eyes, trying to relax as the human carried him steadily through the palace halls. Eli glanced around, looking for the fastest way to reach the royal hospital. The palace was enormous, with tall golden pillars, shimmering floors, and intricate floating staircases. Courtiers and servants stared in shock as Eli passed by, their eyes wide. Many whispered among themselves. "Is that a human carrying the prince?" one asked. "He dares to move him alone?" Eli did not answer. He kept his focus on the prince and the path ahead. The young dragon prince coughed quietly and Eli whispered, "Just a little further. We'll get help soon. You're going to be okay." The journey was not easy. Palace doors were large and heavy, and some hallways were crowded with nobles and guards who tried to block the way. "You cannot do this," one guard shouted. "Return the prince to his chamber immediately." Eli shook his head, his grip steady. "I cannot wait. Every moment matters. He could die if I stop." The guard hesitated, seeing the determination in Eli's eyes. He realized that the human meant what he said. With a sigh, he stepped aside, allowing Eli to pass. The prince's small heart beat faster with each step, but the steady arms of the human gave him comfort and courage. As they moved through the palace, Eli noticed small details that helped him navigate quickly. A side corridor led directly to the hover carriage that could take them to the hospital. He adjusted his path, moving swiftly but carefully. The prince's breathing grew steadier, and his weak fingers twitched slightly as he clung to Eli's shoulder. Finally they reached the hover carriage. Eli set the prince down gently on the soft seat, securing him carefully. "Hold on tight," he said. The carriage lifted smoothly, hovering over the golden palace towers. Below, the floating city of Draconis glimmered in the morning sun. Citizens looked up in amazement, pointing at the small human carrying the emperor's son with courage and speed. Eli spoke softly to the prince, keeping him calm. "We're almost there. The healers will take care of you soon. You just have to hold on." The prince tried to nod weakly, his golden eyes shining with gratitude and trust. For the first time since falling ill, he felt hope. The journey through the air was smooth but tense. Every second mattered, and Eli kept his focus entirely on the boy. No one else had acted, no one else had cared, but this human had taken responsibility. His courage, quick thinking, and willingness to act gave the prince a chance at survival. When they arrived at the royal hospital, the doors opened immediately. Medical drones and healers rushed to assist. Eli carefully lifted the prince into the hands of the healers. "He is very sick," Eli said firmly. "He needs immediate treatment. Please help him." The healers gasped, surprised at how pale and weak the prince was. They quickly moved him to a treatment table, surrounding him with healing machines and medical devices. Eli stayed close, holding the prince's small hand, whispering words of encouragement. "You're going to be okay. Just hold on. Help is here now." Prince Kalen managed a faint smile, exhausted but relieved. For the first time in days he felt safe. The human cleaner, who had risked everything to carry him through the palace and the city, had changed everything. Without Eli's courage and determination he might not have survived. Eli stepped back slightly, watching the healers work. He felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing he had done the right thing. The prince was no longer alone, and life was returning to the young dragon. Even in a world of powerful dragons and endless politics, a small human had made a difference. And in that moment, the palace began to see that courage and heart could come in any size or shape. Eli guided the hover carriage carefully through the golden streets of Draconis. The young dragon prince, Prince Kalen, lay in his arms, still weak but now slightly more relaxed. His golden scales caught the sunlight, shimmering faintly despite his illness. Eli's heart raced as he navigated the floating city, knowing that every second counted. The palace had ignored the prince's suffering, but Eli was determined to change that. The citizens of Draconis stared as the small human carried the emperor's son with courage and skill. Dragons flew beside the carriage, noble citizens paused in awe, and children pointed excitedly. Whispers spread quickly through the streets. "Is that a human carrying the prince?" one asked. "He dares to challenge the palace rules?" Another said, "Look at him. He is saving the prince." Inside the carriage, Eli spoke softly to the boy. "We're going to the hospital, Kalen. You just hold on, okay? The healers will take care of you soon." The prince managed a weak nod and tried to smile. It was a small gesture, but it filled Eli with hope. He had never met anyone so small in size, yet so brave in heart. The journey was not without challenges. A sudden gust of wind from the floating towers tilted the hover carriage slightly. Eli adjusted quickly, keeping the boy steady. "Almost there," he whispered, glancing at the hospital gates in the distance. The city below gleamed like a river of gold, reflecting off the smooth, glass-like surfaces of the towers. Every citizen who saw him now realized that courage did not depend on size, strength, or status. Eli's mind raced as he planned the fastest route. The streets were crowded with market vendors, nobles in elegant robes and hovering carts. A group of palace guards spotted the carriage and began to block the path. "Stop," one shouted. "Only the palace healers can transport the prince. You are not allowed." Eli did not stop. "He's very sick. He cannot wait." His voice was calm but firm. "You can either help us or step aside." The guards hesitated, unsure what to do. They had never seen a human act with such authority and confidence. Finally, one of the senior guards stepped aside. "Go," he said quietly. "But be careful." The carriage continued, gliding over the golden streets. Eli kept the prince stable in his arms, watching carefully for any obstacles. The prince coughed weakly and Eli whispered, "You're okay. Just a little further. We'll get you to the healers soon." The boy's small hand rested against Eli's arm, and he felt a spark of comfort from the human's determination. As they approached the royal hospital, Eli could see the large gates opening automatically. Medical drones hovered in the air, and healers rushed to the entrance. The moment was tense. The prince was still very weak, and Eli knew that the healers must act quickly. He carried him down the ramp carefully, making sure not to jostle him. The lead healer, a tall dragon with silvery scales, gasped at the sight of the pale young prince. "He is in critical condition," she exclaimed. "How did he get here in this state?" Eli explained calmly, "He was very sick in his chamber. No one acted, so I carried him here myself. Please save him." The healers worked quickly, placing the prince on a soft treatment table. Machines hummed to life, scanning his vitals, measuring his pulse and monitoring his breathing. Eli stayed close, holding the boy's small hand. "You're safe now, Kalen," he said. "The healers are here. Just relax and let them help you." The prince's golden eyes fluttered, filled with relief. He could feel the warmth of the human's courage and the steady strength that had carried him through the palace and city. Even though he was small and weak, the presence of someone who cared gave him hope. He whispered, "Thank you," barely audible but full of sincerity. Eli smiled faintly. "No one else cared, but I did," he said softly. "And I will always care for you." The healers nodded in approval. "This human saved his life," one whispered. "We can see why. Without him, the prince might not have survived." Outside the hospital, the citizens of Draconis watched in awe. News spread quickly of the small human who had carried the Emperor's son through the crowded streets and dangerous skies of the floating city. Whispers turned into admiration. "Humans are braver than we thought," one citizen said. "And clever too." Inside, Eli continued to stay by the prince's side. Machines worked, potions were administered, and the boy's breathing grew steadier. Slowly his strength began to return. The palace had ignored him, but this human had risked everything. Courage and quick thinking had triumphed over neglect and bureaucracy. As the sun set, golden light filled the hospital hall. Prince Kalen's small chest rose and fell more evenly. He managed a weak smile for Eli. "You saved me," he whispered. Eli nodded, brushing the boy's hair back gently. "Yes," he said. "And you will be okay now. The healers will take care of you." For the first time in days, the young dragon prince felt hope. He realized that true heroism was not in armor or magic, but in courage, determination, and caring for others, no matter how small or powerless they seemed. And Eli, the human cleaner, had proven that even the most overlooked person could change everything. The royal hospital was filled with soft light from the tall glass windows. The healing machines hummed quietly, casting gentle glows across the room. Prince Kalen lay on the treatment table, weak but beginning to show signs of life. His golden scales were slowly regaining their shine, and his small claws twitched with renewed energy. Eli, the human who had carried him through the palace and city, stayed close, holding the boy's hand and speaking softly. "You're doing well," Eli said. "Just relax. You're going to be okay." The prince managed a faint smile, tired but filled with relief. For the first time in days he felt safe. The palace had ignored his suffering, but this small human had risked everything to save him. The healers worked quickly, administering healing serums and checking the prince's vitals. Machines beeped softly, monitoring his pulse, breathing, and energy levels. Slowly, color returned to his scales, and his golden eyes sparkled once more. The room seemed brighter, warmer, as if hope itself had entered with Eli. Outside, news of the human's bravery spread through the palace. Courtiers, nobles, and guards whispered to each other, astonished by what they had learned. "A human carried the prince?" one noble murmured. "Impossible," another said, shaking his head. "Yet it is true. He actually saved him." The Dragon Emperor arrived at the hospital, his long golden robe flowing behind him. He stopped at the doorway, his eyes wide as he saw his son resting safely and the human standing close by. "You saved my son?" the Emperor asked, his voice deep but tinged with surprise. Eli bowed slightly. "I just did what anyone should do, Your Majesty," he said. "The prince was very sick and no one else acted. I carried him to the hospital so he could get help." The Emperor studied him carefully. He had seen humans before, often in minor roles carrying supplies or cleaning halls. But he had never seen one act with such courage and determination. Slowly he nodded. "Your actions honor both our people and yourself," he said. "You have shown bravery and wisdom beyond your station." Prince Kalen, now feeling stronger, opened his eyes and looked at Eli. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice weak but sincere. I would not have survived without you." Eli smiled faintly, squeezing the prince's hand gently. "You're going to be fine now," he said. "The healers will take care of the rest." As the prince recovered, the court had no choice but to acknowledge Eli's bravery. The nobles and guards who had dismissed him earlier now bowed respectfully. They realized that strength, status, and authority did not always guarantee success. Courage, quick thinking, and determination could achieve what armies or magic could not. Days passed, and the young prince regained more of his strength. His scales shone brighter with each day, and he was able to lift his head and speak in full sentences. The healers praised the human for his quick action, explaining that without Eli's courage, the prince might not have survived the first night. Prince Kalen insisted that Eli be allowed to remain close to him. "You saved my life," the boy said. "I want you nearby so I can learn from you and remember what true courage looks like." Eli shook his head, smiling humbly. "I only did what anyone should do," he said. But the prince would not let him refuse. The emperor observed quietly, realizing a lesson he had not learned before. Humans, often overlooked and underestimated, could possess courage, intelligence, and heart beyond what dragons or nobles could imagine. Eli had proven that heroism came not from size, power, or magic, but from determination and the willingness to act when no one else would. Eli spent time helping the prince exercise his claws and practice breathing exercises, ensuring his recovery continued smoothly. The boy laughed softly as Eli guided him gently, learning that humans could be clever teachers as well as brave saviors. The palace, once focused only on rules, politics, and appearances, began to change its view of humans. They were no longer merely cleaners, helpers, or servants. They were capable of bravery, quick thinking, and compassion. Eli's actions had not only saved a life but had shifted the entire perception of his kind. As the sun set over the floating city of Draconis, golden light filled the hospital room. Prince Kalen's chest rose and fell steadily, his energy returning. He smiled at Eli, his small face glowing with gratitude and newfound strength. "You are a hero," he said quietly. "Not because of strength or magic, but because you cared enough to act." Eli smiled, brushing a strand of hair from the prince's eyes. "Sometimes the smallest actions make the biggest difference," he said softly. "And courage comes in many forms." For the first time, Prince Kalen understood the meaning of true heroism. It was not in the palace guards, the powerful nobles, or even the magic of dragons. It was in a small human who dared to care, to act, and to risk everything to save another life. And as the prince rested peacefully, fully recovering, the palace began to see a new truth. True courage and intelligence could shine in the most unexpected places. Eli, the human cleaner, had not only saved the prince but had shown everyone that heroism is not defined by size, species, or status, but by heart, determination, and the willingness to act when it matters most. The palace of Draconis was quieter than usual that morning, though the golden halls still glimmered in the sunlight. Prince Kalen was awake and healthy, his scales shining bright and golden once more. He sat near the tall windows of the royal hospital, looking out over the floating city with a sense of wonder. His small claws tapped lightly against the polished floor as he thought about the human who had saved him. Eli, the humble human cleaner, stood nearby, quietly organizing his small toolkit. To the palace staff and the nobles, he seemed ordinary, small, unassuming, and without power or rank. But to the prince he was a hero. Eli had risked everything to carry him to the hospital, facing guards, crowded streets, and the indifference of those who should have acted. Without him, Prince Kalen might not have survived. The Dragon Emperor entered the room, his long golden robe trailing behind him. He stopped beside the prince and looked at Eli with something close to awe. "I have seen many things in my life," he said slowly, "but I have never seen courage like yours. A human, small and unarmed, carrying my son through the palace and city when no one else would act." His voice trailed off as he shook his head in disbelief. Eli bowed slightly. "I did what anyone should do, Your Majesty," he said humbly. "He needed help and no one else acted. I could not stand by." The emperor studied him for a long moment. "You have shown wisdom, determination, and heart," he said finally. "Not all heroes wear armor, and not all strength comes from magic or power. Today you have proven that courage and intelligence can change everything." Prince Kalen smiled at Eli. "I want everyone to know your name," he said. "You saved my life. You are not just a cleaner, you are my hero." Eli shook his head gently, smiling. "I only did what was right," he said, but the pride in the prince's eyes warmed him. Word of Eli's actions spread quickly through the floating city. Courtiers, nobles, and citizens whispered about the human who had dared to act when dragons of power had hesitated. Many marveled at his courage, and some were ashamed that they had ignored the prince's suffering. The tale of a small human saving the dragon prince became known in every corner of Draconis. The Dragon Emperor called a special assembly in the palace courtyard. Bright sunlight filled the space, and citizens gathered to witness the event. The emperor spoke, his deep voice carrying across the golden halls. "Today we honor a hero," he said. "Not a knight, not a mage, but a human, a being often overlooked, underestimated, and dismissed. This human saved my son's life through courage, intelligence, and determination." Eli stepped forward, his small frame standing among the taller dragons. The crowd gasped and whispered in astonishment. The emperor continued, "Let this day remind us all that true heroism is not measured by size, magic, or rank. It is measured by heart, by action, and by the courage to do what is right when others will not." The prince approached Eli and placed a small hand on his shoulder. "From this day on, you will have a place in my life and in this palace," he said. "Not as a servant, not as a helper, but as a friend, teacher, and guardian. Your bravery has shown me the meaning of courage and I will never forget it." Eli felt a warmth in his chest he had never experienced before. He had only wanted to help a boy in need, but his actions had changed the hearts of dragons, nobles, and citizens alike. The prince's respect and the emperor's acknowledgement made him realize that even the smallest being could make a difference in a world of giants and power. In the following days, Eli was given a small workshop within the palace. He repaired machines, helped with daily tasks, and advised on safety and emergency matters. Prince Kalen often visited him, asking questions and learning from the humans' clever methods. Together they experimented with small inventions and ways to improve palace safety. The other humans in the city began to be respected in ways they never had before. They were no longer only cleaners, helpers, or minor workers. They were thinkers, problem solvers, and heroes. The story of Eli, the human who saved the Dragon Prince, inspired humans and dragons alike to see each other differently. The young prince, fully recovered, walked through the palace with renewed confidence. He smiled at the citizens and knights, proud of the human hero who had saved him. "Courage," he said softly to Eli one afternoon, "is not about strength or magic. It is about heart, action, and caring enough to risk everything for someone else." Eli nodded. "Exactly," he said. "Even the smallest action can make the biggest difference." And so, the tale of the human cleaner who carried the Dragon Prince to safety became a legend in Draconis. Children would tell the story, nobles would whisper it, and even the emperor himself would recount it to visitors. Humans, once underestimated, were now seen as clever, brave, and capable of changing the course of history. Prince Kalen never forgot the small human whose courage and determination had saved his life. He grew up to be a wise and fair ruler, always remembering that true heroism could come from the most unexpected places. And Eli, the humble human, continued his work quietly, content with the knowledge that he had made a difference, proving that heart, intelligence, and bravery were more powerful than any armor, magic, or title in the galaxy.